This is Guitar Business Radio, the podcast for the business of guitar. No reviews, no demos, no idle chatter, just useful dialogue and information to help you get the most out of your guitar-related business. Whether you're a guitar builder or a guitar player or just something in between, this is for you. Now, here's your host. Oh, wait, it's me, Jeffrey D. Brown. So let's get to it. From Guitar Business Media, this is episode 26 of GBR, where today we will bring you absolutely no reviews, no demos, and no idle chatter. What you will get is another unique and diverse interview about the business of guitar from many different angles. Today, we're joined by recording artist and professor at the USC Thornton School of Music in the studio and jazz guitar department, Richard Smith. We'll get a unique perspective on the business of higher education in the guitar world, and Richard will tell us about his Thunderbolt moment. So we'll get to that in just a few moments. So there's a lot of talk starting to emerge on tariffs that relate to the guitar business, and this is something that has the potential to affect a lot of people in the industry, from manufacturers to players and many others in between. Now, I've said a few times before that I generally consider this a partisan politics free zone, which really means I'm not editorializing on a particular political position. I'm not taking sides per se. And in this highly charged political world we live in today, that's sometimes a tightrope to walk. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we won't discuss issues relevant to the business of guitar. But if we do, it will be at the very least from a balanced and informative perspective. And it will be free of this overheated, highly emotional, opportunistic political rhetoric that really serves no good purpose in my view. So with that in mind, we'd like to hear your thoughts and your views on the topic of tariffs as it affects or may affect the guitar world in one way or another. And you can communicate with us a lot of different ways if you like. Email us at contact@guitarbusinessradio.com. Use the contact page on our website, or just call us on our GBR hotline at 888-777-2404. We'd love to hear from you on this topic or any other for that matter. And while we wait for that to happen, here's something completely different. Well, Professor Richard Smith became the chair of the Department of Studio and Jazz Guitar at the renowned Thornton School of Music at USC at the age of 28. And after serving in that role for nearly 16 years, he's continued there as a full professor for the last 10 years, all the while working as a busy recording and touring artist with 13 solo recordings and a huge array of projects and accolades too numerous to mention here. But we'll let him talk about all that as Richard Smith joins us right here and right now. Well, Richard, I'm thrilled to have you on the show. I'm glad you're taking some time out and we were able to work this out. So welcome to Guitar Business Radio.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, as listeners know, we always kind of start off with these foundational questions, and it's all about establishing an understanding of what your career business is built on. What kind of a foundation have you created that, you operate with now? And so everybody's got some building blocks, some of those things that made up that foundation. So I'd like to hear from you, which of those building blocks come to mind that were the most impactful in getting to where you're at right now?
I'm from a small town in Oregon, a medium-sized town, right? Eugene, Oregon. And when I was a kid, I had a guitar and I played it and so forth. And I noticed that if you carried it just right on your back, girls really dug it. It was the 60s kind of hippie stuff.
Right, right.
And then I went to a concert. I was riding my bike home after something. I was just as excited about guitar as I was about soccer and anything else. But I was riding my bike home and I heard a concert going on at the Union there, at the Union Hall there. And it was the Chick Corea Electric Band, 1974, Return to Forever, Al Di Meola.
Oh, sure. Right.
Stanley Clarke. Incredible, right? Mm-hmm. The album was Where Have I Known You Before? And I snuck in, crawled under the stage and got right up close and so forth, this 14-year-old kid. And I came in just during Al Di Meola's solo guitar. Now, Al was 19 years old, and he looked like he was 14.
Yeah,
and so it was stunning. And also, in fact, I'm from it's a small town. We didn't get a lot of concerts. We got the Grateful Dead once a year or something like that. And so the lights and the sound and the way that he pulled that sound out of the guitar was incredible. It was stunning to me. And, I watched the whole concert, and he not only did a solo on that ovation that just tore it up with the flamenco stuff, but he also played the electric guitar on that Black Les Paul of his. Mm-hmm. And, it was like this wave of something magic. It was like fairy dust coming over the top of me, right?
Yeah.
And I got on my bike, and I rode my bike home at about 11 o'clock, 11:30, and I called my girlfriend up, and I said, I've just been to the most incredible concert I've ever seen. I think I know what I got to do. I just love playing the guitar. She's going, oh, that's so awesome. That's really great. Yeah. And Al Di Meola, I think if I practice 10 hours a day between now and I'm 19, I'll be in Richard Corea's band, And she's going, oh, that's so exciting, sweetie. And I said, and we're going to have to break up.
Yeah. You said that?
Yeah, I broke up with it because, I didn't have time for a girlfriend. So she's like, the sound at the end of the phone is nothing. And then there's this click.
Oh.
And I went, right. Okay. So here I go. That's what it takes. You got to sacrifice. And I made a big pot of coffee and I tried to stay up all night practicing. And I made it to about 3 o'clock in the morning and crashed, woke up around noon and went, what have I done? And tried to get back to – anyway, long story short, that concert really did impact me, and I did practice 8 hours a day after that for the next year. And within a year, I was playing clubs, jazz clubs. And in Eugene, we had 5 jazz bars, okay, which is 3 more than they got in L.A. now. And so if I wasn't watching Robert Cray, who was a local,
sure, wow.
He came in regularly,
yeah.
And or some of the incredible Sonny King or some of the incredible jazz musicians, I was booking my own little band. And the band was made up of 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. So I learned at the time, too, that you always be the worst guy in the band, and that'll pull you along. I learned more from those guys about booking gigs because I would do the work. I would work hard. I'd put a set together. I would think about my audience. I mean, it was actually, if I think about it now, I was pretty kind of a crazy kid. But I even made enough money by the time I was 15 and a half to buy a truck. I bought a truck for the band, a 51 Dodge pickup truck that we could haul our stuff in, man. And I was too young to drive. So the bass player had to be with me when we drove to gigs, and I had a learner's permit and so forth.
Oh, sure.
But we put all that gear in the back of that truck. So this is something I call my Thunderbolt moment, and I really try and get my students to address that, or when I do a lecture someplace or something, I think, has anybody been affected by that Thunderbolt? And what that Thunderbolt was in The Godfather 1, we just call it 1, where Michael Corleone is, off getting on a vendetta, and he's walking the hills of Sicily, and he sees the most beautiful woman, Apollonia, and he just stops there and he's stunned. And his bodyguards are saying, "Uh-oh, he's got the Thunderbolt." Oh. You can Google it, actually. It's an amazing moment in that film. And that was this chiropractic adjustment to whatever's going on, whether it can be a stunning woman, or it can be Al Di Meola playing the hell out of a Les Paul, or whatever it is. But it hits you at this time in your life, at this psychological moment that you're ready to hear it. And I never looked back. I mean, honestly, I was playing gigs from the age of 15 on, and all the peripheral stuff that went with it came naturally to me, or just through that. You have to get a truck to haul the gear around. You have to practice, of course. You have to think about your audience. Huge. The audience is the most important thing in the universe. I knew that at that time somehow. Yeah. And your clients, or whatever, however you want to.
And we understand that here too. We understand that it's the listeners. Yeah, right.
It's a universal fundamental, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was just for frame of reference, and you may have said it earlier, and I've already forgot. But time frame wise, this was what, 70s, 80s, or
74, 75, 76 I was 14, 15, 16 years old. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and somewhere in the midst of all that, my dad called it my peculiar obsession. Okay.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the midst of all that, my grandfather sat me down in the backyard and he said, it's really great that you enjoy the guitar and so forth, and you're doing a nice job with it, but what the hell are you going to do with your life? He was a CEO of a corporation called Maccabees Mutual Insurance, a very large insurance company in the Midwest. He was big cheese. And, at that moment, I just blurted out, because I come from a very academic family. I have my uncle was a linguistic philosopher at MIT. His wife was a classical philosopher at Tufts. They named a building after her. My cousin teaches philosophy at Oxford. My dad was an architecture professor. My mom's got a PhD in history. So
that explains, and we'll talk about this further, but that explains to me a little bit about how you ended up in the academic world too. Is that part of the history of that? I mean, was that just ingrained in your DNA that you were going to get into that?
I think it was comfortable and familiar to me.
Okay.
And whereas a lot of guitar players don't, that I really feel fortunate because of that. We lived right off campus. My paper route was the U of O, University of Oregon campus.
Okay.
And so it was really natural to me. At the same time, existential philosophy is not blues-based guitar playing.
Right.
So you could feel like I had a lot of layers of anxiety existing at that moment when my grandfather said, "What the hell are you going to do with yourself when I have this kind of legacy to live up to?" I said, honestly, I would like to run the best electric guitar program at the best school in the world, the best.
And you said that at what age? 15?
16 and a half, I think.
So,
and I remember,
wow, okay.
Pretty interesting.
And you pretty much did that, right?
Well, I think I'm fascinated by that because I had no intention of doing it. I said it to kind of make him happy, but it kind of painted this picture that I thought, because I knew also that professors had summers off. I thought, how good is that, right? So I went to the U of O. That was just at the age to start checking out schools, and I went to the University of Oregon. It was assumed that I would go in there. I had just about the right. I mean, I thought it was doing great. I did straight C's. Great, I'm doing good. And I got into the U of O, but they wanted me to audition on classical guitar, which I played a little. So I put together a Vivaldi concerto that I played for them, and I squeaked in. But they didn't know what to do with me. Music schools at that time, and they still are this incredible bastions of classical music.
Right.
And if it's not classical, it's jazz. And any jazz professor only got to be a professor because he convinced classical musicians how much like classical music jazz is, which is not what pop is. And so I went into school going, if they've been teaching this for 400 years, I'm going to be the best damn drop the needle guy. I'm going to be able to identify, in the midst of Gregorian chants, I will be able to find the year and the guy that wrote it and da-da-da. And so in that sense of me just being open to it and being able to gig at the same time, it was okay, but they really didn't know what to do with me. I was mainly an electric guitar player. So that was one of the things that was to follow me the rest of my career, was how this small segment of the university can be so conservative and kind of live in the same way existentialism is. It's like a small component of the English department. So if you look at sales figures, classical music is this incredibly tiny part of what goes on as far as the rest of the music world. Now, popular music and contemporary music is America's greatest cultural export. You can go anywhere in the world. And I was in 11 countries last year, and you will hear Michael Jackson, or you will hear Kendrick Lamar, or you will hear part of this amazing thing that happens in this country exclusively. And so the fact that it's taken so long to get even as far as it is in schools where they're actually teaching contemporary music is, I was listening to your interview with Chris Standring, and he was saying, well, I went to college, and they taught me how to read music and play a bunch of different styles. And I thought, what college is that? There's so few,
Yeah.
Maybe there was one in London, but there wasn't at the time. There was two here, Berkeley and North Texas State. So,
right. That's right.
So my options were kind of limited. I had to be resourceful.
So did you, obviously you got out of school, you made it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think I went from C's to B's because I had to. And my band got I have a couple of friends of mine who are professionals now and we're doing very well. We piled into a car and we decided to go to North Texas State because that was the only music school that actually taught contemporary music, which was jazz. And while we were there, we had made a demo tape and we got a record deal. So we quit school after one semester and went back to Eugene and practiced all day long and wrote songs and got ready to do this deal. And then the deal fell through, and I ended up finishing at the U of O and then coming down to USC on a master's degree scholarship, teaching assistantship, and auditioning for that. Yeah, paid me $300 a month and free tuition.
Is that so? That was the start of the thing at USC. That's how
Absolutely.
it started.
I wanted to be that guitar player on Magnum PI, Hill Street Blues, the A-Team. I wanted to be that guy and make, remember the Guitar Player magazine, how they would go through Tommy Tedesco and he'd say, I did this cue and I pulled the wool over their eyes.
Yeah.
$387.
Yeah.
That was very, very inspiring to me. And
so that's what you wanted to do? I mean, you wanted to do studio session work? Yeah.
TV sessions.
Oh, okay.
And my teacher was Steve Watson, who played on all those shows, and he taught at USC, and it was wonderful. I'd go along with him to the Universal recording sessions and things like that. And that was fascinating from a lot of different levels, particularly the immensity of the investment in that. So you're in the room there with 40 studio musicians who are like LA Philharmonic guys daylighting, and then you've got, I think one of the sessions I was on, there was Vinnie Colaiuta and Lee Sklar, and John Goo, and this amazing rhythm section. And then if you could think about this, like Pete Carpenter was conducting, then you have in the studio, you have a guy just looking at the levels on this 24-track machine. It's only 24 tracks, so you got one take. You have, so he's just watching the levels. He's getting $20 an hour. You've got a score reader and a main score reader who's telling the engineer where to bring up the levels. So it's an amazing operation. You got one guy on union scale just turning the click track on and off. And you got the whole orchestra with a can in one ear and the other ear open so they can see the cues and stuff like that. So one mistake is like $3,000 or something like that. And they do two takes, and it was so amazing. It's definitely the highest level to aspire to, because you got to read this stuff that is crazy hard, and you've got to do it in one take and not making mistakes. So that's. Once I got into the machinations of that, I realized, that this was a pretty serious deal. And that was what I came to LA to do.
So let's take it from there. You finished. You got out of USC. I mean, you didn't get out of there, but you did the master's program there?
Yeah, I did, and it was wonderful. The guy that founded that program. I told you about the classical heaviness of the University of Oregon. Well, here, my department chair was the guy on Looney Tunes that did the He was that Hawaiian guitar player who'd be like when the coyote fell on the
sure, yeah.
He did all that. So there, I was with my people. I found my people, and Steve Watson, and at the same time too. The classical program here was amazing. We had the whole LA Guitar Quartet. I went to school with most of the LA Guitar Quartet. And so my pals were really at a high level. Larry Coons was in this program, and Andy York was also in the program. So it was a really heady atmosphere. And I kept writing music and playing. My band was playing at the Baked Potato, and I was doing sessions for Japanese pop artists that would come over. And I was with people like Vinny was on those sessions as well, and Joe Sample and so forth. And we would do like 2 albums a day sometimes. And then that group of producers came over to the Baked Potato, and they offered me a record deal because my band was playing. They offered me a record deal in the parking lot. I signed the deal in the parking lot. Oh. They gave me $10,000 cash.
Is that right?
Yeah. Worst deal I ever signed. I ended up owing them money.
Oh, but with actual cash?
For a poor kid from Eugene, Oregon, that was a pretty big payday.
Probably don't see that too much anymore.
No, you don't.
It's and it would be a suspicious deal probably.
Oh, there was this deal definitely was suspicious, but it allowed me to make my first record, and that record got nominated for Record of the Year in Japan.
And what was that called? Which album was that?
It was called Inglewood.
Oh.
Which is where I was living.
Okay. Well, you just pulled something out of the air, or was there a reason for it being called Inglewood?
No, that was it. Inglewood, I learned a lot about urban music living in Inglewood and paid my dues. Mm-hmm. Like living in Inglewood and going to USC. South Central LA at that time, in the early 80s, was a pretty tough place. Yeah, pretty rough place.
I can imagine.
But actually, from a business perspective, again, like when I was 14 and I figured out how to put a band together and do gigs, I knew that there were a million guitar players trying to get their or musicians trying to get their music played on radio. And I thought, what is the difference? Who's going to care if they get 100 CDs a week? A kid named Richard Smith. What's going to get them to play my CD? And I thought, wait, I know a couple of my friends are doing really well. Why don't I invite them and then say featuring? And those friends ended up being Dan Siegel, who was quite a well-known keyboard player. He's, and Kenny G.
Oh, yeah.
And that was right about the time that Kenny was doing duotones, which was to become the most famous instrumental cut of all times, or the Songbird. And so that got me played. And actually, that record, I listen to it now, it's difficult to listen to, but I knew what I was crafting. I was really crafting something for radio, for the audience. Again, it comes back to the audience, addressing my audience, trying to, instead of being the fastest, loudest, highest guitar player, impressing guitar players, I knew that from working with what was to become smooth jazz or contemporary jazz artists, I would look out at the audience and I would see the moments and the songs that they were enjoying. It wasn't necessarily the solos. Yeah. It was the vibe, the pocket, whatever the producers sweat, I was sweating kind of naturally without knowing it.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. So, kind of keeping track of the timeline, you continued to work, and how did you move into? What was your affiliation with USC? And let me understand how that kind of developed, because that's an important part of what you've done.
Well, I'm really glad you asked that. I mean, I didn't want to teach. I didn't think teaching, I thought it was really great that I come from a long line of teachers and I understood the ideal of the university and how great it is. But my department chair, Duke Miller, who was actually Lee Ritenour's teacher too, and Lee went to USC and so did Paul Jackson Jr. and so forth. He passed away and left an opening, and I lived in the neighborhood, and I would come to the recitals, and I'm a jovial guy and so forth, and I was a supportive person, and they gave me a load of students and to kind of stay in there, and so I was there 2 days a week teaching the bottom of the rung students, like the ADD kids and stuff like that played speed metal and stuff, and it was challenging, and then shortly after Duke passed away, the gentleman Paul LaRose, who took over Duke, got Lou Gehrig's disease and passed away.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It was really terrible. So it's in that context of these great mentors that I kind of felt a mission.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
I became the chair.
You became the chair at what age?
28.
28. I've heard you say that before. That was the number I had in my head. 28 years old. How did people look at that at the time? I mean, did you have credibility as a chair? I mean,
well, having a smooth jazz hit does not really rank as credibility in the university structure. So, and I don't mind that. I mean, honestly, it's like I don't have any, like the classical guys weren't, really relating to the jazz guys, and the jazz guys were kind of in their own sort of thing. So I was kind of, this guy from out there. But then again, the department chair was also the Hawaiian guitar player that played the Looney Tunes theme. So I think in that context, we developed this idea that to be studied broadly, to be studied thoroughly, the guitar has to be studied broadly. So what I did at that time, they both went so fast that I had no idea what I was doing, really. Mm-hmm. And so, but we had this awesome curriculum that was set in place. And so I just thought at the time, I'm going to really prepare these students the best that they possibly can be prepared for, not only academia, but for professional life. And in the years since then, I think that's that thing, to be studied thoroughly, it has to be studied broadly. You look at any jazz guitar player these days, and they're going to be able to cite Jimi Hendrix as an influence, and not just Charlie Christian and so forth. So if you embrace that and see that there's this incredible environment out there, and also you have to have a lot of resources to keep working, and that just seemed to make sense. But since then, my students are playing with Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, John Legend, Gwen Stefani, Mark Anthony, Thundercat, John Mayer, Jennifer Lopez, Maroon 5,
and the list goes on. Huh?
Elton John, Madonna. I mean, and they're like the kid that's on American Idol is one of our students, mm-hmm. and a great jazz guitar player. So that sort of blue collar success comes from a very conscientious curriculum that was put in place when I got there.
Let's talk a little bit about, because we're a business-oriented show. Obviously, I'm interested in what people are learning and in terms of the real aspects of the business that many of them are going to get into. And I think it's worth talking about. I'm just wondering if there was some emphasis on that, or was that minimal at some point? How's that been handled, and how would you characterize it?
You mean, are they prepared to engage the music world of the present when they graduate? That sort of thing?
Yeah. And are they learning any, I guess, what I would probably call business skills? Yeah.
I think I learned something about 3 years ago from David Foster, who came and did a clinic. David Foster's one of the great producers of all time. He's got 16 Grammys and 28 nominations. So he was there, and he did a workshop for the entire faculty and the popular music program, which we have the only one in the country at our level. And he said, so what is the single most important component of success in the music business? He just asked us straight out, and nobody could answer it. And some people said, hard work and preparation. He said, no, you're all here in a major university. You're all used to that, and none of you are making hits yet. Another guy said, it's definitely, how about love? And he goes, no, man, it's not love. I've been married 4 times. It's definitely not love. So he shut us down. We couldn't answer it. And I thought, this is going to be special. And he said, networking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, this guy is saying that that's the most important component in a success in music career. And I decided that semester, I had a really good student, really good guitar player from Florida. And I said, Dan, we're going to try something different this semester. I'm going to spend 50% of the time showing you some new things on the guitar, and I want to spend 50% of the time networking, because it's always come to me kind of naturally, although I read a great book called Swim with the Sharks and Don't Get Eaten Alive when I was on the road years and years ago. And it's been huge, which is the first real deep networking book. But anyway, so I said, so we concentrated on that. And I said, what 5 bands do you want to be in when you graduate? What guitar players do you absolutely love and can't get enough of? And where do you get goosebumps? I said, let's go track these guys down. And he did. And he quit school at the end of the year because he was working so much. All right. I mean, there was a few more nuanced ways of interacting with getting that, but that proved to me that networking, that getting your name out there and expanding your world and doing a great job. You can't network crud, but developing your brand. These were all sorts of vulgar kind of things that guitar players didn't talk about. Okay, branding and networking and outsourcing and so forth,
and sales. That's another thing that creative people don't like to get involved in. And I've always thought of myself as a hybrid kind of guy. I got the right brain thing from my mom, and my dad was a great sales guy, marketing guy. So it's a balance, and I would say that those, if you look at people who've got a little bit of that balance in them, guys like Chris and Carl, and that was the thing I liked about those interviews, that you could see the entrepreneurial streak in them, that they've decided that they have to kind of take things into their own hands in some aspects of it. You can't really depend. It's like the hungry man waiting for the roast duck to fly into his mouth. It's that old saying.
That's my quote.
Yeah, I know. Well, I just stole it, but I've stolen it many times because it's so true. And so it sounds like you were trying to instill some of that in students.
Well, Chris said something beautiful when you were interviewing him. He said that he found marketing to be really creative. Mm-hmm. And that he looked at it with the same kind of brain that he looked at guitar, which I know Chris well enough to know that he just and Carl too. The enthusiasm drives a lot of that. What I found though too is guitar players are great. Okay, let's just tick that box. I say this to my master's and doctoral students at USC. Let's tick that box. You're good. You're good enough. Okay. And what is it? And then we work a lot on what it is that they do. So I guess you could call that branding. But what is it? What is their niche? What is the message? What is their audience? Here's where everybody falls down: the marketing aspect, getting to your audience and compelling your audience to buy. And branding is the ask. Branding is what you do, but marketing is getting them to actually invest. So that's the thing that I've been kind of intrigued with lately.
You were the chair for quite a few years. Did you say it was something like 15 years or
15, 16 years? Yeah.
And then how did you exit that? What was the reason for exiting?
I stepped down because it was the minutia of actually the management of that was getting in the way of kind of some ideas that I wanted to do. So, and also I had a great colleague, Frank Potenza, it was time for him to come up to that job, I felt. And I said, just one day we had a meeting and I said, I'd like to step aside and work on some other things. And he stepped in and has done a wonderful job in the last 10 years. Now we have a new chair too, Nick Stubas, who's going to be absolutely phenomenal. And in those years, when I stepped aside, it's interesting how one door closes. Sometimes you have to close those doors
to open another one, right?
To open another one, and
exactly.
My life expanded exponentially after that. I built a cabin I bought some land up in the San Juan Islands, built a cabin, and over the summer breaks. And I expanded my European models. And so I have a band in Holland. I've got a band in Italy. I've got a big band in London. I have tons of contacts in Scandinavia where I'm going to be teaching. So it was that sort of thing that happens to a lot of people who've been going along one path. And then they Jeff Lorber calls it reinventing himself. Mm-hmm. And that's also not real common with classical or jazz musicians, mainstream musicians. And in this, I could kind of I wanted to go after my audience, but also add to that audience. So I did a record called Tangos. And I went to South America on a tour with a great guitar player down there, Daniel Corzo, and was just really, I got the bug. And I started reading Pablo Neruda, the great poet. And I realized that I was getting just a little bit bored with the smooth jazz stuff I was doing. And I did quite a few records with some really great labels and had a lot of really great hits. But it was that point where I was just going, I have to, my integrity as an artist, I need to feel that same excitement that, again, Chris was talking about on the interview the other day. It's like, I'm, being engaged and being excited about what you're doing. And I heard this nouveau tango stuff and I went wild. I just went kind of haywire. And so I made this record of tangos, which actually did great at radio, but I also expanded to the more international audience. And so I rolled the dice, and I knew, teaching about risk and dreams and struggle and so forth, I knew I had to change something up. And but my business, my aesthetic business model was keeping the same audience, keeping my fans, and expanding them. And the smooth jazz fans are pretty particular about what they hear. So I had to do some remixes and things like that. Well, since I've done the tango thing, I have my music is orchestrated out for full orchestra, dancers, narrator. I go and do residencies at universities that have orchestras that are dying for new, exciting music. And so I kind of invented another direction. Rather than being a guitar player and a sideman and an artist going down that same path, I kind of opened up this area that embraces the school aspect, that gets me teaching, playing, and then people come out to the concerts and they buy the CDs at the concerts and the kids are having a great time and we're all learning tango because none of us really know how to do it, So it's kind of a neat model.
Well, you mentioned something which sounds like a good cue. I wanted to ask you. I know you got this gig in Finland that you're going to be doing. I've had a chance to look at it. Looks interesting to me, and so I'd like you to tell us a little bit about it and where you're going with it.
Well, first of all, the cool thing about being a professor, I'm a full professor with tenure at USC. So.
And I'm going to refer to you at some point as Professor Richard Smith, but I'm not sure where.
Richard works fine. But as a tenured professor, one of the great things is that every 7 years you get something called a sabbatical, mm-hmm. which is the Greek root of that is Sabbath, which kind of implies rest, but actually it's for the purposes of, and it's just one word, enrichment. And so you get 6 months off at full pay, or you get a full year off at half pay. And I've done both over the years. And so this year I decided to take an invitation to develop a program in Finland, which is, I think, number one in the world as far as education goes. Their kids go in at 10 o'clock in the morning and come home at 3, and they don't have any homework, and they're the smartest kids on the planet. So they really dialed it in. So this, from that perspective, too, being surrounded in that environment with people like that, I think is going to really help enrich my teaching.
Yeah, I'm going to imagine.
So it's a program called Master of Culture and Arts, Entrepreneurship in the Arts, Music, Media, and Marketing.
That's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. It's a degree, so you might as well put all those, make that sound great.
I was reading the title, and I must have read it half a dozen times to try to figure out where's the emphasis here? How do I say this? It was like, because there was a comma where I wasn't sure there was supposed to be a comma, but there is a comma there, and I know it's there on purpose.
I didn't have anything to do with that title. Actually, they came I gave them the prospectus, and they came up with that title. I just wanted to call it Music, Media, and Marketing. And that's really what my focus is particularly the music and what's really fascinating is we in Finland you aren't allowed to go back to a master's degree until you've been in the professional environment for 3 years. So you have to graduate, and then it's 3 years after that we can take them in. So these are experienced people who are really serious about what they're doing. We have about 6 or 7 songwriters. And my job will be on several different levels, but will be to get their music on the next level and have it do what I think is my favorite term with graduates is how do you break through? How do you break through to reach your audience? How do you break through the morass of the din of how many artists there are out there? And that's going to be a really great challenge.
And that really has to do in some part with the business side of things, doesn't it?
Well, I think so. That's what one of the really exciting things is for an artist is to be different. And one of the things that breaks through with businesses is to be different. And that's a huge creative process.
Yeah, the differentiation is really important. I've always been cognizant of that over the years, and different clients that I've worked with. Well, a lot of times we have to sit down and figure that part out. That's one of the components that, and the differentiation certainly does get the attention. So it's how long is the program? It's a master's program. Is that what you're?
Yeah, it's a master's program. It's 3 semesters. We're funded by something called the Erasmus program. And Nord Plus, which are these 2 massive educational grants in the European Union. So we were actually traveling to a lot of different campuses, and Norway has a fantastic music business program. So we're going to go and embed ourselves in that for 2 weeks. And
that sounds good.
Do some things in London and so forth. They really, the European Union, because of all the things that have been going on lately, they're doubling their efforts to really get the students to communicate and work with each other. And I think that's a fantastic way through some of the world's difficulties.
Sure. Absolutely. So, and you'll be involved in this for the full year? Or is that the plan?
I'm just going for 1 semester, and then I will fly back for the assessments at every semester. And so I'm leading it. I'm putting the people together. And they also, the thing that's great, Jeff, is in the last 10 years that I've been going abroad so much, everyone speaks English. Yeah. It's really difficult to find a country, in Norway, they hardly have an accent. So it's just opened up this whole new world. To me, it's like the 51st state, Europe. Yeah. I just go there as often as I'd go anywhere. And I really advise my grad students to explore possibilities over their teaching and for their career because, education is free, and so is healthcare is free. I had pneumonia. I was in the hospital for 4 days, full spectrum antibiotics, really bad pneumonia. And my bill was $111. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the doctor apologized to me for that. Because I was some kind of foreign fee. But anyway, those sorts of opportunities, if you're raising a family and so forth, are priceless.
So that's going to take place in the fall?
Yeah, fall.
Yeah. So
and then while I'm doing that, I'll fly out on the weekends. I've got a little tour of Denmark and Holland, and I've got some master classes in London. So I'm using the weekends to go out and do all kinds of things.
So it looks like you'll be a pretty busy guy. Sounds like fun, and I hope that you'll keep us informed about what's going on. But I always like to end the interviews with something on the perspective level and get a sense from you where you think we're at now in terms of the business side of things, because you're involved in many different aspects of it, not just the teaching part, but other aspects. So where do you see things now, and where do you think we're going? And that includes Richard Smith. And it's a real broad question. So, and you're a thoughtful guy, so I'm going to give the floor to you and let you run with it.
Okay. Well, this has really been fun. I'm kind of bummed that we're finishing it up. But, Jeff, I think this will resonate with a lot of people. The business has never been tougher. It's never been harder. And, intellectual property is going away. It's not nearly what it used to be. There used to be 78 jazz stations in the country, and I'd go, and my songs would get played on, 4 or 5 of the songs off each record would go, and I could tour, and they would support it. Those are gone. Terrestrial radio's gone. Difficult. Entertainment saturation, because we're in the middle of the information revolution. So that the competition for an audience is harder and to play for them. Music education is still, by and large, trying to catch up with where it should be. And the DIY model is a huge part of that. And that's why I'm doing this thing in Finland, so I can get on top of that. So I have to invest to stay relevant, as a professor. College debt, most of my grad students are terribly in debt. Everything is DIY now. That's a whole different thing. Whereas it's like the opposite, where you used to practice all day long. Now you have to be your own record company, like some of your other interviews, right? So these guys are adjusting to that. Having said that, there's something I've said since I was a kid. It's tough, but so am I. And that has informed a lot of creative thinking as far as how to reinvent myself. And as I said before, when I really put myself in that position, that being in a chair for 16 years is plenty, I got lots more things to do. And I got some ideas that I want to work out. They might fall on their backsides, but I want to chase these ideas hard. And my life expanded exponentially after that. So I think that those, when you're a kid, you dream. You got this idea of playing with your career or something like that, right? So I found that fear, dreams, risk, and struggle are 4 things that we all deal with a lot. Well, the dreams, strangely enough, is something you have to keep alive when you're older. They become more important.
Absolutely. And that's it's not something that we do exclusively as kids, unless we're still kids right now, and to some degree, in a small way, we are. But that's what keeps us going. And as I tell people laughingly that I'm in the throes of middle age, I'm absolutely sticking with that, and hopefully that will last a long time. I have no visions of being a senior citizen. I'm not disparaging that. The discounts are fine, and as long as we stay healthy, and part of that is being healthy above the neck too. So
precisely.
But very, very interesting stuff, and I'm looking forward to having a further discussion and doing some other things down the road, Richard. And I do really appreciate you taking the time to have this really thoughtful discussion with us. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. I think this is a wonderful format, and I think your listeners are going to get a hell of a lot out of it. And I'm looking forward to I enjoyed the episodes I got to look at to kind of prime myself for this very much.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I'll take that as a compliment. But we're gonna keep being as diverse as we can to expose people to all kinds of ideas and information that they can take some inspiration from and learn from and get ideas from. So again, have a great rest of the summer, and certainly we're going to be in touch after you've gone off to Finland.
Awesome, Jeff. It's great talking to you.
Take care.
You bet.
Welcome back to the back of the show, where if you made it this far, you're probably willing to take a chance on unpredictable topics and discussion you might not necessarily expect on a guitar-related show. So I enjoyed interviewing the professor. He combines a very intellectual academic point of view with that of a working artist. Not that those are incompatible. Obviously, they're not, as witnessed. One of the things that I found refreshing was his innovative attitude and understanding that educating people in the arts, and especially guitar, needed to be broadened out so that students move from school to professional careers with a wider perspective that includes an understanding of the business side, which, of course, is what we're all about. He talks about the value of differentiation, and you can see that in his own music. He's not been afraid to venture into uncharted waters. And while being different can be risky at times, innovation is by its very nature different. It has to be in one way or another. So again, I thought there were a lot of good lessons here. I mean, after all, he's a teacher. Why wouldn't there be? And that makes me wonder a little bit about all those people who fear risk. I mean, there's some amount of risk involved in change. And yes, it can be defined in many ways, but change happens whether we want it or not. And change is required for us to grow. And if we're not growing in a positive way, well, we're stagnating. And that certainly doesn't seem all that desirable to me. So how do we reduce our fear of risk? Well, I can tell you that's not something I'm going to answer in this segment. But you can get a lot of clues by listening to previous back of the show or value shot segments of GBR. But one thing I will tell you is what I tell you at the end of every show, and that is to stay positive, stay focused on the destination, and keep all your options open on how you're going to get there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again on episode 27. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.